All right, well, good morning, everybody. Bonjour. My name is Andy Fillmore. I'm the Member of Parliament for Halifax. It's wonderful to be with you today. Merci de vous joindre à nous aujourd'hui à l'occasion de l'annonce de financement pour cette importante initiative. I have with me this morning the Honourable David Lametti, Canada's Minister of Justice and Attorney General for Canada. We have the Honourable Sean Fraser, Minister of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship and the Member of Parliament for Central Nova, and the Honourable Brad Johns, Minister of Justice and Attorney General of Nova Scotia. Now we're going to have the opportunity to hear short opening remarks from each of these guests, and then we'll go to questions and answers. And as usual, we'll go with one question and one follow-up. Le format est d'une question avec un suivi. S'il vous plaît, posez vos questions dans la langue officielle de votre choix. Feel free to ask your questions in either official language. Before we get started, I just want to cover up a few housekeeping details. As always, please turn off your camera and keep your mic on mute when you're not speaking. Please use the virtual raise hand function to pose a question during the Q&A session that will follow. And if your meeting functions aren't showing, just go up and click the three little dots that appear in the top right-hand corner of your screen. And for those dialing in, you can press *6 to mute and unmute yourself. Je cède maintenant la parole au Ministre Sean Fraser, who will be saying a few words. Over to you, Minister Fraser.
Thanks so much, Andy. I appreciate the kind introduction. Hello, everyone. Bonjour tout le monde. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that I'm joining you here today from the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. I also want to take just a few seconds to acknowledge that in my home community where I am today in Pictou County, we're marking a rather solemn occasion with the 30th anniversary at the explosion of the Westray mine. And I do want to extend my thoughts and sympathies to the family members who continue to grieve. And I look forward to joining you this evening at the ceremony commemorating this tragic event. It is a great pleasure to be here with you today to be part of an announcement for an important investment that's going to support victims of crime in Nova Scotia. Our government is committed to taking action to ensure that victims of crime have access to justice and the resources that they need when they need it most. Our government is going to continue to be there to support the most vulnerable. In such difficult times in their lives, victims of crime and their families need relevant financial, emotional, and legal support. They need information on how to best navigate complex legal proceedings and in a complex court system as well. They need to be treated with cultural sensitivity and respect and know that they're going to receive fair and just treatment no matter what their background. Survivors of sexual assault in particular face additional concerns around privacy and re-victimization during a particularly vulnerable legal process. That's why we need to consider things like enhanced training for those who help victims and survivors, both inside and outside of the courtroom. They help victims deal with trauma and the many other emotions that come with being victimized by criminal behavior. Through Justice Canada's Victims Fund, the government supports organizations and different levels of government that address all of these kinds of challenges that face victims of crime and those who assist them. This includes funding for provinces and territories and providing direct services to victims of crime. Nova Scotia's Department of Justice, Maintenance Enforcement and Victim Services Division plays a significant role in this regard. It provides a range of support to victims of crime as outlined in the Canadian Victims Bill of Rights. Its programs provide information, assistance, and referrals for victims as their cases move through the criminal justice system, and additional direct supports for victims and their families when criminal charges are in fact laid. The funding that will be discussed shortly is going to help ensure that victims of crime in Nova Scotia are well supported within the justice system with meaningful and culturally appropriate information and legal assistance. It gives me great pleasure to help introduce one of our guests, Minister David Lametti, the Minister of Justice and Attorney General of Canada, who will be able to provide some more details. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. Merci tout le monde.
There we go. Thank you, Sean, for that introduction. Hello, bonjour. I'd also like to thank the Honourable Brad Johns, Nova Scotia's Attorney General and Minister of Justice, for joining us today. And of course, our moderator this morning, my colleague, MP for Halifax, Andy Fillmore. I also noticed that my colleague, Lena Diab, is also online with us this morning. It's wonderful to have a number of great legal minds in the cabinet, so people like Sean, and Lena, who is actually a former Attorney General as well. It's great to have those resources when you're doing the job that I'm doing right now. For my part, I'm speaking to you from my office in Ottawa, which sits on the traditional territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation. People in Canada deserve to live in a truly just society. For this to happen, we must transform our justice system into one that is more fair, accessible, and focused on the people it serves. This work is especially important for people who have been traditionally underserved or who face additional barriers to justice. This includes Indigenous victims of crime and survivors of sexual assault. Sadly, the numbers are staggering. In 2018, almost 6 million Canadians, 30% of women and 8% of men had been a victim of sexual assault since the age of 15. Also, tragically, Indigenous women are more likely to face violence in their lifetime. In a survey released earlier this year, almost 2/3 of First Nations and Métis women and almost half of Inuit women experienced violent victimization. Cette situation doit changer. Alors que nous poursuivons nos efforts en vue de cette transformation, nous devons aussi absolument répondre aux besoins actuels des victimes d'actes criminels. Cela signifie prendre des mesures pour nous assurer que les victimes connaissent leurs droits et puissent se faire entendre efficacement dans le système de justice pénale. Cela signifie fournir aux victimes et à leurs familles les renseignements et les ressources dont ils ont besoin. Et cela signifie leur offrir des mesures de soutien appropriées et adaptées à la culture. Dans le cadre de ces efforts, notre gouvernement est déterminé à comprendre les besoins variés et complexes des victimes autochtones d'actes criminels et à y répondre. For example, we're increasing the delivery of culturally grounded and trauma-informed victim services and supports for survivors and their family members. We're also supporting independent legal advice programs for people who experience sexual assault. The goal is to help victims and survivors on their healing journey and increase their access to justice. One way we are doing this is by supporting organizations and provincial and territorial government services that have expertise and knowledge about how to best help victims and their families. And this brings me to Nova Scotia. Nova Scotia's Department of Justice, Maintenance Enforcement and Victim Services Division plays a pivotal role in this regard. Among its many functions, it helps people in Nova Scotia access the justice system and important legal information in order to better understand their rights as outlined in the Canadian Victims' Bill of Rights. These services are a critical lifeline for so many Nova Scotians, and we're proud to work with the Government of Nova Scotia to support them. And now for today's announcement. I'm very pleased to announce that the Government of Canada is providing $6.21 million in funding over 5 years to the province of Nova Scotia to enhance support and increase access to justice for sexual assault survivors, Indigenous victims of crime, and other victims of crime across the province. This investment includes over $3.5 million for the Enhancement of Services for Victims of Crime program to help better victim services and implement the Canadian Victims' Bill of Rights in Nova Scotia and to reduce barriers for Indigenous victims of crime. The funding will provide customized and culturally safe victim services for Indigenous victims of crime. This is one part of our work to transform how Indigenous peoples interact with the justice system and how to advance reconciliation. The funding also includes direct supports to assist with unpaid restitution orders and enhanced training for staff who work directly with victims of crime. Another $2.68 million is directed to the Sexual Offense Legal Representation Program to provide survivors of sexual assault with access to legal advice and representation. This program will help protect survivors' privacy and personal integrity during sexual assault trials by offering access to trauma-informed legal representation. Then, in cases where a survivor's past sexual history or records are sought as evidence, this funding will help to ensure that the survivor's privacy rights would be adequately raised with the court. This is one way to help prevent re-victimization of survivors and better support them in understanding their rights. Les fonds dont il est question aujourd'hui sont fournis par l'intermédiaire du Fonds d'aide aux victimes du ministère de la Justice Canada, lequel soutient les projets qui font connaître davantage les besoins des victimes et des survivants d'actes criminels, qui améliorent l'accès aux services et aux mesures de soutien. My thanks to Nova Scotia's Department of Justice, Maintenance Enforcement and Victim Services Division, and to everyone working tirelessly to improve the safety, security, and well-being of victims and their loved ones. You're making a tangible and positive difference in the lives of so many people across Nova Scotia. Finally, I want to acknowledge the courage of all these victims of crime. May we continue to be guided by their experiences and their equitable need for access to justice. Thank you. Merci.
Thank you very much, Minister Lametti. Merci beaucoup. Je cède maintenant la parole au Minister Brad Johns, who will be saying a few words. Over to you, Minister Johns.
Yes, thank you very much, and welcome from beautiful sunny Nova Scotia today. It's an honor to be here with my colleagues from the federal government, Member of Parliament for Halifax, Andy Fillmore, the Honourable Sean Fraser, and of course, Minister of Justice and Attorney General of Canada, Honourable David Lametti. I'd also like to recognize one of my former colleagues from the Nova Scotia Legislature I see with us today, MP Metledge Diab. Good morning as well. Nova Scotia has a strong victim services programming, which provides vital supports to victims and witnesses of crime and their families so they can recover from trauma. We are always trying to find new ways to support survivors, including the development of new approaches, promoting access to justice, improving the capacity of service providers, fostering the establishment of referral networks, and increasing awareness of services available to victims of crime, witnesses, and their families. We've heard clearly from First Voice survivors and other advocates and service providers that we need to continue to strengthen our supports for survivors of sexual assault, and they are navigating the criminal justice system. We continue to make important investments to help victims of crime, and the federal contribution today will be fundamental in advancing this work. Two important services that will benefit from this investment are the Independent Legal Advice and Sexual Offense Legal Representation programs. The Independent Legal Advice provides legal advice to adult survivors of sexual assault navigating the courts and the legal systems. The program represents the privacy of survivors and their right to make their own decisions. Since its inception in 2017, over 468 people have benefited from the independent legal advice, 104 survivors in 2021 alone. A committed roster of lawyers contributes to the success of this program in Nova Scotia. The federal funding today will strengthen the services as well of the independent legal advice provided in terms of enhanced supports for rural victims of crime by supporting the Victim Impact Statement Travel Fund. The Sexual Offense Legal Representation Program provides legal support to sexual assault survivors. The objective of this program is to ensure that the privacy interests of survivors in sexual assault trials are adequately raised with the courts whenever past sexual history or private records of survivors are sought to be introduced as evidence. This access to legal representation allows survivors of sexual assault to challenge these applications to protect their privacy, their personal integrity, and to help prevent further trauma. As part of the Canadian Victims' Bill of Rights, access to justice can also include restitution payments to the victims. The development of online restitution payments by the way of referrals through the restitution coordinator have been instrumental for victims receiving restitution in our province. This funding today will allow our program providers to continue to do their vital work of meeting survivors wherever they might be on their journey. In closing, I would like to once again extend my sincere gratitude to our federal counterparts on behalf of all Nova Scotians for helping us support all victims of crime in accessing justice. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Minister Johns. Thank you, Minister Johns. We'll now begin the questions and answers period. A reminder to please virtually raise your hand to indicate that you'd like to ask a question, or press *6 if you're dialing in. Nous allons maintenant amorcer la période de questions et réponses. N'oubliez pas de lever virtuellement la main pour poser une question. Si vous nous suivez par téléphone, veuillez appuyer sur #6 avant de poser une question. We'll take the first question from video participants, and then we'll go from there to the telephone line. Nous allons d'abord répondre aux questions des participants par vidéo, puis à celles des personnes au téléphone. And I will just take those questions in the order that they appear on my screen. So please start to raise hands.
I think we have a question from CBC.
Very good.
Oh, she's now put down her hand.
Okay. I'm not seeing any hands on my screen. Here we have another one. Yep, CBC, please proceed. Well, you must have done an excellent job presenting the facts this morning, ministers, because it appears, at least for the moment, that you've satisfied the curiosity of the media. I'll just give it one more try here. If anyone wants to raise their hand or press *6 on their telephone to raise a question. I see a little hand up from Marie from CBC. If you're able to unmute yourself and ask a question if you have one, that would be great. Okay.
We're unable to hear you, Mary.
Yeah, we can't hear Mary or Marie from CBC. Well, I see that Terry Davidson has his hand up. Maybe while Marie is figuring out her mute, we can move on to Terry Davidson. Terry.
Hi, good morning. I just want clarification on one thing. I was really last minute on jumping into this. I apologize, but I just took a brief read through the news release that's on the Government of Canada website now. It says the Government of Canada is providing a total of $6.2 million over 5 years, starting April 2021. So I'm just wondering what the news part is today, if this started back then. Is this just sort of a reminder of what's going on, or what's newsy about this announcement specifically?
Thank you, Terry. Look, we haven't announced this yet, so this is relatively standard practice that we announce things when we get to them, and in the COVID context, that has been challenging in the sense that we've had a number of virtual announcements, but there's always, when we have major things like the fall economic statement and then a budget, we have a number of different funding announcements that we have to make, and we try to get to them all in due course when people are available, and so that explains it. There's no, it is still news in the sense that we haven't said anything about this yet. We have said things about the program in other places and spaces, but it is our way of communicating with the provincial government to the people of Nova Scotia.
Okay. Right. Yeah. Sorry about that.
But I was getting really bad feedback in this, so should I just?
Sorry. Sorry. When I read that paragraph, I took a quick look online and didn't see anything. And I thought I'd better ask just in case I'm missing something here. So, but thanks for clarifying that, Minister. I appreciate it.
No worries. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that, Terry. Let's try Marie Adset again from CBC. Marie, are you able to give it a go?
Can you hear me now?
We can, loud and clear.
Good morning. Thank you very much for taking my question. You talked about accessing justice, and it seems that there is a great injustice that continues to happen in Nova Scotia. I'm actually surprised with today's announcement. I'm relieved to hear some support of victims. However, none of you have mentioned the Nova Scotia shooting. There is the Mass Casualty Commission continues their work, and they have been appealing for help from the community. The mayor has shared with me today that 2 years on, there is anxiety, anger, lack of sleep, violence, suicidal tendencies, PTSD being suffered in the community. We could have done better. At what point are all levels of government going to respond to the victims of violence in that community and in the entire province that has been untouched? They are suffering. So we've heard this from the MCC, and there's still no action. The Prime Minister has held meetings with the mayor and other key people in the community, and still nothing. Can someone answer why no one is answering this call? And at what point will you?
Brad or me? Brad, do you want to go first and I'll come in? Or do you want me to come in first?
I just wanted to say thank you very much for your comment. And as we progress forward, of course, the Mass Casualty Commission is an independent inquiry that is going on. I've had the opportunity to attend in person a couple of times to listen to a few of the presenters there, and hopefully, although the interim report recently just came out about a week ago, you know, I know that from a provincial perspective, we're certainly looking forward to the recommendations that come out at the final report in November, and so we're looking forward to that before we can really move forward to do anything else.
That could be 3 years on.
Let me just add, Marie. Thank you. I appreciate. Look, it was a horrific tragedy, and I think we're all.
It continues to be.
I understand that, but we have put into place an inquiry because that's what families have asked, and the two governments working together set up the inquiry. Now we have to let the inquiry do its work. They have set out a methodology in that report last week that is careful, that is very respectful of victims, tries to be supportive of victims and their privacy. We know it's going to be a challenge, and we're always open to listening, but we do, in order for that inquiry to do its job, the political side has to stay away. From it and let the commissioners do their work in an independent fashion. I know that's hard, and I know that's frustrating, and I know that everyone's dealing with still dealing with these traumatic events, and we'll continue to be open to other ways of being supportive.
Remember how they got the inquiry was that they took to the streets, and people there are saying, are we going to have to return to the streets in protest to get the support that we need? And you can act on interim suggestions.
Is there a question? You have a follow-up question there, Marie, if you'd like one. Otherwise, we'll see Brad. Minister Johns has his hand up. You'd like to add something?
Yes, very quickly. And certainly, having been at the hearings personally, I do see a lot of the hurt and the grief that family members are feeling there, and you know, our hearts go out to them. I would point out that we do have grief support and services currently are in that community and have been since the initial incident. And also during the commission hearings, there are also victim supports that are there as well, as we try to maintain that trauma-informed approach. So I just clarify that as well.
Trauma-informed would have meant that you actually prepared the people and the community for the inquiry and all the details that they are hearing. It's been done backwards.
Minister Fraser, please.
Thank you. And look, I think it's really important as we reflect on the experience of the families that there's no process, there is no support that is going to undo the hurt that they're living through. We all remember where we were that morning. There's friends of mine that have been impacted. There's people who lost loved ones that have become friends of mine since through those conversations. I think it's important that we don't look at today's announcement and conflate that with any sort of lack of empathy, of support, or understanding. Today's announcement is related to a much broader issue around access to justice, not specific to the horrific circumstances that continue to impact those of us in Nova Scotia and more specifically the families. To the extent that in addition to the work of the commission, which is working to identify what had happened and potentially to make recommendations so this kind of thing never happens again, if we want to be continuing our conversations to engage with people who've been impacted by this horrific shooting that shook the conscience of our province, Of course, members of parliament have an open door and want to work with families to understand how we can better support them. But I don't want your questioning to take away from the importance of today's announcement, the support that's going to reach victims of crime, going to allow the system to better respond in an area, frankly, where I think it's underperformed for many generations, in support of Indigenous peoples, in support of survivors of sexual violence. This is a really important announcement today, and it does not take away one iota from the work that we need to do to continue to support those families. But I just want to reiterate, as a Nova Scotian and somebody who knows some of those families who've been impacted, there's not a day goes by that we don't think of them. And to the extent that they feel they need to communicate with their members of parliament, they can rest assured that we're going to continue to listen and work to make sure, to the extent it's possible, both levels of government, I think, are committed to supporting them in their time of need.
Thanks, Minister Fraser. Any other questions from members of the media? Okay, we are over time, so I'm going to call it there, my friends. That's all the time.
Hello.
Oh,
Is anybody there?
We've got someone coming in here. Okay.
Oh, sorry. Hi, it's Keith Doucette from Canadian Press on the phone.
Sure.
I'm just wondering, in terms of this specific announcement, whether you can give us some tangible examples of what the money will be used for these programs. We have obviously these programs, and we've lawyers involved, various other kinds of workers. What will the money enable these organizations to do in terms of assisting victims of crime?
Who would like to take that one?
Brad, do you want to jump in because they're provincial programming?
You're on mute there, Minister Johns.
Sorry, thank you very much. As I said during the announcement, you know, it'll be able to provide our independent legal advice to survivors. It'll be used for helping to maintain privacy. And so we're quite excited that that we have this announcement today, the 6.2, and thank the feds very much for it.
I would add to that suite of services that Minister Johns just pointed out that there is also specific money targeted, $3.5 million for the enhancement services, victim services, including Indigenous victims of crime, give them culturally safe and customized services. Again, they've, as Minister Fraser's pointed out, this is a community that's been underserved across Canada, and this is a tangible way in which Nova Scotia and the federal government are working together to try to address the problem in Nova Scotia.
Okay, thanks, ministers. Last call for media questions.
Wondering if I could have a follow-up?
Oh, I beg your pardon. Yeah, you go right ahead.
Yeah, it's on a slightly different topic. Now we have the federal minister here. I'm wondering, on Friday, the Halifax police basically came out with a tip line for gun violence, and you may or may not be aware of the increased spate of gun violence that we've had in the city of Halifax over the last 6 months. I'm just wondering how high is it on your radar, and are there any open channels of communication between Ottawa and officials in both Nova Scotia and Halifax about what to do about what's happening here? Because there's definitely a lot of concern within the city about the number of shootings we've been seeing recently.
Thank you for that question. Look, it's a priority. It's very, very, I don't know what the right metaphor is here, high on our radar screen, or in the middle of our radar screen, as the case may be. It's under the auspices of Minister Mendicino in public safety, but I know that he's in contact with his counterparts across the country. It's something that's happening in various places across Canada, so it is a challenge. We've invested a lot of money, particularly at the borders, for better security, enhancing better security at the borders, and anti-gang activity programs again across Canada. And I know that Minister Mendicino and a number of federal ministers are in constant touch about what to do, but certainly he is in fairly constant contact with his provincial counterparts.
Minister Johns, your hand is up. Is that a relic from a previous response? It's a relic. Okay. All right, my friends, I think we're going to call it there. We're significantly over time now. Merci encore d'avoir participé aujourd'hui. Si vous avez des questions au sujet de l'annonce faite aujourd'hui, veuillez communiquer avec les relations avec les médias du ministre de la Justice à l'adresse suivante, media@justice.gc.ca. If you have any further questions about today's announcement, please contact the Department of Justice Media Relations at media@justice.gc.ca. Merci beaucoup tout le monde, and I wish everyone a wonderful day. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, everyone.